Kr'Thak are a sentient, spacefaring race, thought to be a travelling species, and one we know next to nothing about. Our introduction to this species is slightly different to our usual encounters. In fact, humans have yet to officially set foot on what is known to be the Kr'Thak's homeworld within the system of Krell. For this reason, we know very little about the Krell system and its inhabitants. It is entirely unknown what goods they might be interested in trading, what they produce, and technology they have, or which items they deem illegal. It's also unknown exactly how to reach them. Our only knowledge of their very existence comes from the Xi'an. The Xi'an Emperor has repeatedly stated that the Kr'Thak are an enemy of the Xi'an, and to understand why, we need to venture back to 351 Standard Earth years. This was the start of the Spirit Wars, a series of hostilities between the Xi'an Emperor and Kr'Thak, which lasted around 990 years. The Spirit Wars are the longest and most devastating conflict in the Xi'an history. Throughout this time, the two warring species would intermittently launch their attacks. In 1286, this stopped, and the Xi'an assumed the war was over. But 10 years later, in 1296 Standard Earth years, after a 10-year period of peace, the Kr'Thak attacks resumed. We still know very little about the encounters of this time, but a letter entered into the Kr'Thak archives within the Ark gives a glimpse into the attacks that the Xi'an experienced. Lith of the Xi'o, beneficent and righteous caretaker of the Xi'an people, wrote to Matriarch Yom and the Council of House Kr'Thak. Some group of Kr'Thak has struck our training station in the orbit around Tethtam, on the edge of Jotun, taking care to target the escape vessels as they completed their awful mission. Hundreds of untested young service members, fresh from their mothers' homes and in possession of the future of their lines, were all ambushed. Imperial rescue ships failed at a timely arrival, and those who had not already passed away were forced to make a wretchedly pitiful choice. The space station and its ships were all tragically lost. Her letter concluded with a call to the people to serve their ruler and defend their lands. But in 1342 Standard Earth years, the Kr'Thak launched an orbital bombardment of the Xi'o estate, eliminating the reigning Emperor Xi'o and her house, leaving nothing but devastation and a massive crater in their wake. In the days that followed, the Kr'Thak activated dozens of strike forces around the Xi'an Empire, systematically targeting any location with a remaining member of the Xi'o family. The entire Xi'o line had been eliminated, and their 1,735 Standard Earth year reign was over. This tells us something about what the Kr'Thak are capable of: calculating, destructive, and most certainly dangerous. But we must take this tale with caution, as we do not know the motive behind these attacks, nor the Kr'Thak's side of the story. What we do know is that this attack marked the end of the war. A stalemate occurred, with both sides avoiding further contact. Ueo Sekre, the Xi'an's new ruler, immediately strengthened settlements and military fortifications in systems connected to Kr'Thak. She believed that less contact with the Kr'Thak would increase the chance that this ceasefire would hold, and so she banned jump point exploration in systems connected to Kr'Thak space. And it worked. Whilst relations between the two are still, to say the least, tense, there has been no more reported attacks. This also gives us a little more insight into the Kr'Thak's nature. Perhaps they are, alongside being violent and destructive, willing to compromise. They say all things happen for a reason, and whilst devastating to the Xi'an Empire, the devastation to their systems in 1342 is what led to the Xi'an moving westwards. This is notable, as it was a shift away from the Kr'Thak space to their east, expanding in a different direction, one that would result in them crossing paths with humanity. It is only through this interaction with the Xi'an that we have begun to hear of the Kr'Thak. Whilst we are starting to learn more about this mysterious species, we must take the Xi'an words with caution. The Xi'an and Kr'Thak are ancient enemies. It's naive to think that the Xi'an will forget centuries of war and animosity, and so their description of this ancient sentient race is undoubtedly one filled with bias. This leaves the UEE with a predicament. We do not know if the Kr'Thak will be hostile. Should we attempt to open up a channel of communication with the hope of exchanging ideas, history, and culture? What if the Kr'Thak aren't open to communicating? Could we risk an unnecessary war? We must not forget that this could also damage our relationship with the Xi'an. As the Kr'Thak systems are located on the opposite side of the Xi'an Empire border, we would need to pass through Xi'an territory to make contact. This is not something we can do without Xi'an involvement. How will they take to the notion that we want to make a trade deal with their sworn enemy? If we include the Xi'an in this process, it could help smooth relations between the two. It is undeniable that this is a political minefield that could lead to violence and destruction from more than two species. But this is a decision the UEE need to make. We started our journey into the verse in the hope of discovering new worlds, new species, and new technologies, and now we have the chance to do just that. The solution as to if and when we establish contact of our own with the Kr'Thak is one that is currently open to much debate in the Senate. Whilst there is no concrete evidence to prove this, there are some that suggest that a group within the UEE Senate has already attempted contact with the Kr'Thak through the use of spies. It is widely believed that an attempt to contact the Kr'Thak was intercepted by the Xi'an in 2943, leading to the arrest and capture of freelance hauler Jenk Gallen. Consequently, diplomatic relations between the Xi'an and humanity are now more fragile than ever. We must not forget that since jump points are able to connect and disconnect from other jump points, there is a chance that a direct jump point to the Kr'Thak exists somewhere. Perhaps whether we encounter the Kr'Thak at all is a decision that may not be entirely within our control.
Thank you very much for watching. In this series we are covering the history of the alien races in Star Citizen and humanity's encounters with them. We've touched upon some historic events that happened in our history here. However, if you would like to know more about these events and more about our long and storied history inside the verse, then please consider checking out the Time Capsule series, where this is covered in much more detail. All the links to everything I talk about in this video will be linked in the video description. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the verse.